Okay, welcome back to Getting Lost with myself, Gooder, and my good friend.
Dan, who is totally lost about Lost.
So we're on to episode 10, Raised by Another, which is very much a Claire-based one.
Yeah. And
the only Australian on that flight from Australia.
Yes, I'd cotton on to that. I was like, there must be more Australians surely on this flight. But as far as we're aware, I don't think there's anyone else who's purported to be Australian apart from her. So this episode, I would say, is probably the first episode that I felt was primarily focused on sort of a supernatural theme.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Which is kind of cool because, like, you've had 9 episodes up to this point, and pretty much all of the episodes have hinted at something supernatural in some way, shape, or form. But it's always been a sort of side issue to whatever the episode was really about.
Yeah.
Well, and again, this it still is doing like what seems to be the sort of Lost bait and switch approach. But this one, far more like anything else, the primary plot bits that you get from it work on the basis that something supernatural is going on in some way, shape, or form.
So yeah, I think that feeling definitely starts right from the beginning of the episode with the nightmare.
Yeah,
because it's quite a kind of prophetic type dream sequence.
Yeah, and the nightmare I've just sort of mentioned the bait and switch that Lost seems to sort of make its forte, and the nightmare thing was a really good example of that. Before I go into sort of the bits and pieces that was kind of interesting about the nightmare, the sort of main thing that sort of you come away with is you've got this seemingly supernatural bit where you've got this nightmare, which is fine. You sort of fairly straightforwardly, oh yeah, this is clearly a dream nightmare sequence that's going on. But you have that wake up and her hands are covered in blood, which is like the last bit she sees in the dream sequence where she's pulling away the covers and then blood, and so you immediately have oh my god, it's something more than just a dream because her hands are now covered in blood. And then you've got the classic Lost bait and switch of, but here's a plausible explanation as to why that's occurred, because she's been holding her hand so tightly that she cut her fingernails into her hand. And sort of that little sort of switch is like clearly a technique that's used a lot, or has been used a lot, even 10 episodes in, whereby we've got something that's weird and supernatural, and we're going to give you a bit of an explanation that explains that bit. And it's interesting because what it does is it kind of makes you dismiss the whole rest of it, because like all that's done is provide an explanation for the blood on the hands, but then it's sort of, it's just a dream, you don't need to worry about the rest of it, nothing to see here folks, move on type thing. And if you're, depending on your mindset as an audience member, if you're sort of, I believe the supernatural explanations, or I believe the practical explanations, you both
go either way.
Which again is that sort of interesting thing of trying to separate the views of the audience into different things. The dream sequence itself, it didn't give you a huge amount. I mean, you had the lock and you had the black eye, white eye things. That's again this
the recurring white and black thing.
And I think it was supposed to be tarot cards he was playing.
I
think I wasn't totally sure.
Because I don't think there's a huge amount in the tarot cards, because I don't think you really see clearly what the cards are, but it just basically leans into that element of Claire as a character clearly believes in like astrology and tarot reading and
and you've got I think there's one line which is spoken, which was that he was your responsibility and you gave him away, was the line from Locke, which is kind of foreseeing the stuff that you get to at the end of the episode, kind of, but it's like, it's a weird bit. I think that maybe it'll come to fruition at some point, but it's like that.
I think that kind of clues you in to, obviously, that kind of plot point of Claire was going to give the baby away for adoption, which was like which we kind of find out is the reason why she was on the the plane, but also as that develops, we find out that possibly wasn't the real reason that she ended up on the plane.
You have this possible manipulation of her fate by the psychic dude, essentially.
Yeah, and as you say, like it's interesting because this is like the first time we've had an outright kind of supernatural thing, and even then, it doesn't become clear right towards the end of the episode, because for a lot of the episodes, you can kind of dismiss the guy who's given her the reading as just some kind of crazy guy who's got like a weird agenda that you don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, I think
really when you get Charlie kind of saying maybe he put you on that plane deliberately, and you kind of like, oh, yeah.
And I mean, I think they do enough that, I mean, whenever you've got a psychic, you're always going to be skeptical. Yeah, it's like, well, psychics aren't real, so you kind of dismiss that bits and pieces. But it's interesting that they do enough little bits to make you at least question about whether or not it could be real. So, like the fact he knew that she was pregnant, type thing.
Yeah.
And like, you know, you've got this looks at her friend as well. Have you told him? Because like I've like literally told no one else, type thing. And the sort of,
and he won't take her money, like
In fact, he won't take, and in fact, he steps away from doing the reading. And then when she comes back, he knows that she's broken up with Thomas at that stage. So there's enough in there that you're thinking, oh, is this guy the real deal type thing? You know, it wasn't a straightforward, goes there, everything goes to, you know, you get a reading, some calamity's going to befall your life type thing. It was much more subtle in terms of its establishment of the character type thing.
I think one of the other interesting elements that possibly you could read into it being a bit supernatural is the bit where Claire is in the meeting with the parents from somewhere in like Sydney or whatever, and she's about to sign basically the contract, and then like about 3 pens don't work.
Well, I specifically noted that down, so I immediately drew a comparison between that particular sequence and Charlie's sequence, who's of course the person that Claire's paired with in this episode, when Charlie's asking for his drugs back from Locke. So when he's asking for his drugs back, and Locke makes him ask him 3 times, and on the 3rd time he does take the drugs back, but he makes the choice himself to destroy them. And it's exactly the same this time with Claire, in that she tries to sign away the baby. Pen doesn't work. She gets given a 2nd pen. She tries to sign away the baby, and it's the 3rd pen when she's like, "No, I'm not going to do this." Yeah. So it was very much, again, sort of going back to that. I think I described it as the biblical reference of disowning the person 3 times type thing. And in each case, they've sort of had the opportunity to do it 3 times, but the 3rd time they've actually changed their mind and gone the other path. So yeah, I'd sort of made that connection to Charlie's sort of arc at the same sort of time, where Charlie had the same thing with the drugs, and in this case, Claire's got the same 3 opportunities with the baby and takes that path.
And I think it's interesting as well that we have our first real kind of supernatural elements introduced, and it's with Claire, who already kind of believes in this stuff, and we've seen her talk about astrology before. And then later towards the end, like I say, it is Charlie who kind of has that moment of maybe this is what the psychic guy meant. And we know that Charlie already kind of believes in stuff as well.
Because he specifically says, like, he almost sort of gives a reminder that he sort of believes in this sort of thing, because he sort of says, I can't quite remember the line, but it's something along the lines of, you know, if you believe that he knew, and I do believe there's people out there who have this ability, or something like that. And that's where he sort of comes up with the theory that maybe she was put on the plane deliberately, because he knew that this is what was going to happen.
So I think so far we kind of have like Charlie and Claire who kind of believe in supernatural stuff. I think Locke so far has been presented as a character who, in his flashback, he's not presented as somebody who would believe in it.
No.
But clearly he's had the massive kind of experience of like being able to now walk and stuff. So he clearly believes there's something.
Yeah, I mean, he comes across as someone who's got a more generalized like faith, I guess, in what's going on, like, but it's not necessarily linked to any particular beliefs or anything, I think is the sort of impression from a lot, while these people, the people like Claire and Charlie and so on, have got some kind of structure to what they're thinking about, whether or not it's the right structure or not, but there's something behind that.
They've got like pre-existing beliefs, whereas Locke's kind of the open person to what's happening, and then you have like Jack and Kate, and like and Saeed, who are kind of all very, there must be an explanation. And obviously the sort of flip side of the episode is the fact that with Claire saying she's been attacked, Hurley comes up with this idea of doing a
census.
And this is not the first time that Hurley has actually come up with a really good suggestion.
Yes, Hurley does seem to be the one to sort of gotten on to, this is something we should have done a while back. Maybe it'd be a good idea to know, like, how many people we have and where they're from and all this sort of bits and pieces.
I think Hurley comes off like really well, I think, this episode, because I really like how he treats like that conversation with Sawyer later on, where he's like, I know you've got this. You could be like your usual self about it, or you could just give it to me and we could skip to the end.
Hurley definitely in the last few episodes has definitely moved on from, early on he was kind of just the sort of sidekick type person, and he's definitely evolved already in terms of, he's finding a role in terms of bits and pieces, and actually he's picking up on stuff that really the other sensible people should really have gotten onto by now. Because it's like, I think I joked down. It's like, doing a census makes a ton of sense. Surely you should have done this at the very beginning, type thing. And
I mean, at the very least, you'd want to do it so that how many mouths you're trying to feed, how much water you need.
How many water bottles do you need to take down to the beach? Where are people staying? How many bottles do you need to take down to the beach from the caves, all the other bits?
How much fish do you need to take back from the beach?
Set up some kind of buddy system so that if someone's disappeared, at least you know what's going on. It all seems eminently sensible.
I think this definitely was a sort of an element to me. I think production wise doesn't quite work, because the only person that you see Hurley talking to who's not part of the main cast doing his census thing is Ethan. And you also like. I'd agree with it that there's elements of this bit that just like the whole getting the manifest just doesn't work. In terms of just basic logic, it doesn't quite work. That you could have got that he's done his census thing, then he gets the manifest, and then somehow knows there's someone that's not on the manifest type thing. It just doesn't make any sense to me, because first of all, the manifest would cover the entire plane. There's only 40-something survivors, and there must have been like, a few people on the plane. And they've apparently crossed out the names of all the people who've died. How on earth have they crossed out the names of all the people who've died? That just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. We already know that some people, well, even Hurley himself is going by a name that wouldn't be on the manifest.
No, and I was like, where's Sawyer? What's Sawyer's name on the manifest, given we know that Sawyer's not his name? What's going on there? So we have reason to believe that Kate's name is not Kate. The sort of mechanism they use to have this reveal that there's someone among them that isn't part of the group definitely sort of fell down a bit in terms of logic, I think was how I would describe it. I mean, it was interesting. I think doing the census seemed like a very sensible idea, and I just didn't like that sort of jump to, well, we'll get the manifest and somehow they allow you to cook. It'd be like, well, I've got sort of 6 people on here that aren't on the manifest anywhere, but
and I mean, obviously you can see what they're trying to do. That kind of they wanted to go for that reveal of like, there's somebody here who shouldn't be. And I think the other way, like I said, it falls down is that Ethan, I think, has only really appeared in this episode, and like I think very briefly, like the episode before.
Yeah, he had one line in the previous episode. And it'd be interesting to go, because I watched each episode twice, and I watched the previous episode before I rewatched this episode. I did look out for Ethan on the second rewatch type thing, and they do sort of stick him in the background a few times, looking a little bit weird, and I think that's probably a deliberate thing. And there's a bit of me that wonders if if I went back to previous episode, is he like hanging around doing weird things earlier? But yeah, you don't get to know him until this point in time. And it's also, it's weird because even though you've finished the episode and as an audience person, you're 100% convinced that the person they're talking about is Ethan and he's clearly some kind of weird thing just because he looks a bit weird at the end.
Yeah.
But actually, they haven't specifically said it. They haven't said, "Oh, it's this Ethan dude. He's not on here anywhere." And it's also like I'm not overly convinced that if Hurley was, doing his census thing and then goes and finds the manifest and finds someone that name isn't on the manifest, the immediate response is, "Jack, Jack, Jack! There's someone whose name's not on here. It's a disaster." It's probably like, why don't you go and find Ethan and just check that he's got the right name, or he might be listening to something else. And he's like, there's a million plausible reasons why his name could be different on the manifest.
I think if you just restructured it a little, I think you could make it work a lot more. Because obviously, as the episode ends, you have Saeed coming back, and Saeed comes back with that message of, "We're not alone. Like there are other people on this island." If you kind of have it structured so that Saeed comes back, says we're not alone, and then Hurley overhears that or something, that could start possibly Hurley thinking, "Oh, this weird discrepancy. Then, like, what is that?"
Yeah, and there's things you could do. Like, I mean, one of the things that you could have figured out, like, you could have gone into a little bit more detail and maybe had, these people were sitting here on the plane, I was sat next to this person type thing, and you could have something that doesn't fit, as opposed to this sort of slightly convenient but doesn't really make a lot of sense magical manifest that tells them exactly how many of the 46 should be on the island.
It's definitely one of those things where, like, you can totally see what they were going for, but it just doesn't quite work. Like, it's a little bit rushed almost.
It was like we need to achieve this in order to have our final face-off at the end of the episode, but we haven't really got the time to sort of put together a plausible mystery in order for it to work. We sort of talked about a bunch of the bits and pieces. I think that the other bits that sort of sprung out to me, we got a few extra names thanks to the census. Confirmed that Locke's first name is John. Confirmed that Claire's got a surname Littleton, I think it was. That was note it down. I think one of the
Claire only Australian Littleton.
Yes, Claire, I'm the token Australian on this flight, Littleton. But we put all the other Australians in the other bit of the plane that got destroyed.
All the other Australians were clearly sitting in the back.
Yeah. There's an interesting sort of continuation of the theme that seems to be developing in terms of bad fathers, which I think we talked about in episodes. This one sort of, again, like it always doubles down in that you've got Claire's boyfriend Thomas, and there's a mention that Claire's dad abandoned her or something. So again, there's a sort of, we've now had Jack's terrible father, son's terrible father, Claire's terrible. So there's quite a lot of these sort of fathers not being good, very good.
Yeah, and I guess, and Sawyer's got father issues.
So he's got father issues. Michael's clearly not a very good father for Walt, and so that's definitely becoming a bit of a theme where mothers seem to do a bit better, but fathers in particular not very good at being fathers.
I think well, the other kind of bits I had is I think you have some nice little scenes with Charlie and Claire.
Yep.
But I think what stands out in them is Charlie's like, "I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to make sure you're all right." And I think this is we've seen a little bit to the relationship already, and I think this is like that partnership kind of really kicking into gear, where, like, albeit Claire's a bit reluctant at the first with it, and I think it kind of goes back as well to think what we were saying about Charlie when we had his flashback episodes, where this is kind of Charlie reverting to who he was before, like, his band was a success.
Yeah, and and that's a sort of, we've had that with Saeed, we've had that with Charlie now, in terms of they've gone through something, and this is the thing that's happening on the island is them going back to the good person they were originally, having been through whatever this bits and pieces of. I mean, I quite liked the sort of Charlie Claire interaction bits, and it's sort of it seems like quite a nice pairing of friendship that's sort of developing there. And while Claire is a bit standoffish and she's sort of trying to avoid being the damsel in distress. It's clear that they sort of get on. You know, they've got a similar sort of personality types in terms of what's happening there. So, yeah, I think that worked pretty well. And you always want, you need to have someone for everyone to sort of bounce off each other. And so the sort of nice little, it's quite nice to sort of, when Claire is panicking, it's sort of Charlie's there. He's sort of the one, even though he's like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll figure it out. Yeah. I think is what he says, where it's a case of.
Yeah, there's that nice little bit where he's like, even though I don't know what I'm doing, I'll figure it out. I managed to kick drugs. And Claire's like, what?
I used to be a drug addict, but I'm over that now. But it's a classic thing whereby, like, Jack, you've got Jack, who is, in theory, this is the person that Claire should be going to for help because, oh yes, he's a doctor, he knows about all this sort of stuff. But actually, his sort of cold, logical, practical way of dealing with it.
Because he's had that kind of whole thing of, like, in the episode of, you've just been having nightmares because you're stressed.
It makes him not the person, while Charlie, who clearly doesn't know what he's doing, but actually believes her, is the person who sort of gets her to calm down. And
the only other note I made was, in this episode, in some shots, you can really see Kate's freckles.
Okay. Yes. Yes. I did subconsciously note that. I didn't write it down. I was like, oh yeah, okay, she does have freckles. So maybe I'm less dismissive of Sawyer's nickname choice now.
Yeah, it was only because, we talked about that like the other week. I was like, oh look, she does.
She does actually have freckles. We've actually got some shots on it now.
Oh yeah, that was something that does run through as well. Actually, probably might be worth mentioning through this episode and last week is Kate is the only person who is like worried about where Saeed has gone.
Yeah.
And Jack's quite dismissive because Jack's like, oh, he's a trained soldier, he'll be fine.
Yeah, and yeah, thinking about it, it is interesting, that one, because I don't really think we've seen Saeed and Kate having particularly much of an interaction.
They kind of work, they work on obviously they're both there when they originally hear the
message. Yeah. And that's kind of been their one link, is that
that's the link, because they work together on the through triangulation of the signal.
But I mean, she's the only one who turns up when he's heading off. Yeah, he's the only one he effectively says goodbye to. And as you say, she's the only one looking out for him and being like, he's been gone a week now. And everyone else like, meh.
Yeah. But we're building bamboo pipes. Who cares about?
Yeah. But yes, it's kind of interesting that she's the only one, even though there's not that obvious a strong connection between them. So we've already kind of talked about the psychic and the idea that she's just put in the plane deliberately.
Yeah.
And how that kind of references Locke saying that, things have happened for a reason, which was a sort of line earlier on.
Yeah, which is like a theme that's starting to
come through. That there's
come through a little bit and starting to develop, and it does really play in towards the end of the whole show.
Yeah.
So this is actually one of the kind of things that I'd forgotten about a little bit, that they did start bringing this through like this early.
Yeah, look, this is how each of them got to be on the plane at this point in time. I'll be interested to see how that pans out, because we've got a few different. I'm just sort of going through in my head the sort of explanations that we've had of why people are on that particular plane, and some people we don't have an idea of. So Locke, we know is on the plane. Well, we don't quite know, but we kind of assume he's on the plane because he failed to get on the bus to do his that thing. So that's interesting, because that's a choice not made by him, but a choice made by others. Claire is on the plane because of a choice made by the psychic.
Yep.
Not made by her. That was a choice made by others.
You can assume Kate was on the plane because of a choice made by the marshal.
Yeah. But in contrast to that, you have Sun being on the plane because she made the choice not to run away.
Yep.
And Jack being on the plane because he literally had to bully his way on the plane with the dad corpse, because he had to actually.
Yes, because he wants to get that done as quickly as possible.
Yeah. So there's an interesting thing potentially going on there, is that we're sort of finding out how did they get on the plane, and I think that's going to be sort of a recurring question that we'll the flashbacks will give the answers to. I don't think we know about anyone else, but yeah, you've got
I
this.
can't remember. Yeah, I think Charlie makes the choice, doesn't he?
Well,
Charlie makes the choice to get on the plane, but only because his brother refuses
to rejoin the band.
to rejoin the band.
Yeah.
So again, it's not quite his choice.
There is a choice made by Charlie thinking back, actually, because there's a choice that basically the brother says, "Oh, stay here with me.
Yeah.
There's good rehab facilities there," and Charlie effectively makes the choice of
like screw this.
So yeah, there is definitely there's something going on there with the characters and the sort of choices or the lack of choices that have ended up them on the plane. So clearly a theme that will be developed, or not.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where it's sometimes like I'm not sure how much to say about certain things.
Well, I mean, the whole idea of this is that it'll be interesting in, I don't know, 30 episodes time if more becomes of it or nothing becomes of it. I think we can look back and go, you're completely on the wrong track there.
You spotted that one. Well done.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm definitely like some of these things. I'm definitely like keep an eye on those kind of things because they will like you'll see them. But other things, I'm like I don't want to mention this, and I want to see whether it picks it up.
Yeah.
So that was episode 10, Raised by Another. Join us next time when all the cowboys have daddy issues.